This is episode 45 of the Home and Family Culture Podcast. I'm Jody Chafee. In this episode, I'm interviewing Kristen Jensen of protectyoungminds.org. In this episode, we are talking about pornography, and there is some adult language, so be aware of that as you listen. Welcome to the Home and Family Culture Podcast, where I discuss how families can discover and design their collective vision, values, beliefs, and traditions that influence their family culture. In this podcast, I interview experts who offer tips and tools to inspire families in this process of developing their family culture, and also successful individuals whose success was influenced by their family culture growing up. Be sure to check out the show notes for this and every episode at homeandfamilyculture.com, where you can subscribe for my weekly newsletter filled with updates on the podcast and blog, as well as other tidbits of information I like to add. You can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, or YouTube. Please subscribe to your favorite medium. You can also find me on social media at Family Culture Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest, and at _Family Culture on Twitter. Be sure to comment, follow, like, rate, and share. But enough about all of that. Let's get to the episode. Thank you for listening.
Porn is the enemy. Our kids are not the enemy. Even if they're interested in pornography or have been pulled into pornography, they're not the enemy. When I was growing up, you had to intentionally look for it. Now it is looking for you.
Kristen A. Jensen is the author of the Good Pictures, Bad Pictures series of read-aloud books, including the best-selling Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, Porn-Proofing Today's Young Kids, and Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Jr., a simple plan to protect young minds. She is the founder of protectyoungminds.org, a website dedicated to helping parents empower their kids to resist and reject pornography. Kristen is a regular guest on radio and TV broadcasts, as well as podcasts and webinars. She is a leader in the Safeguard Alliance for the National Coalition to End Sexual Exploitation and has testified before the Washington State Senate Law and Justice Committee on the Public Health Crisis of Pornography. Kristen continues to be a strong voice for protecting children from all forms of sexual exploitation. Kristen is the mother of 2 daughters and a son who is waiting for her in heaven. Her latest honor is becoming a grandma. She lives with her husband and sassy chocolate schnoodle puppy in the beautiful state of Washington. Kristen earned a BA in English Literature and an MA in Organizational Communication. Again, I want you to be aware that this is a very serious podcast episode. It's a little bit of a deviation from my norm, but this is a really important topic, and it's so crucial that we talk to our families about pornography and have conversations about intimacy, and that we model for our children appropriate behaviors so that they are aware and can recognize when something is off, when something's not right, when they can detect evil. Okay, these are important conversations. And so this is a bit longer episode because Kristen and I had a very important and detailed conversation about what her website provides, what her books are meant to provide. And I hope that you'll listen all the way through to the end because it is really important. And I think that Kristen brings up a lot of really amazing and important points about having these conversations. So please guard your innocent ears or things like that if you are sensitive or are triggered by some of the stories and things that Kristen will share. But just realize that this is important, and I hope that you'll listen. So you're kind of coming in the middle of my conversation with Kristen, and we were just talking about the resources that she likes and recommends to help families and understand what family culture is.
And these are ancillary to, preventing issues with porn, strengthening a family.
Yeah.
And communication. So one of the things we have is family stories.
Uh-huh.
And we have a couple of articles about family, the power of family stories. And we have a giveaway, a downloadable that's like 20 family story questions for, and what they've done is a study. This was done several years ago, but it was a study that showed that children that knew more about their family were much more resilient, especially to any kind of trauma. You talked about what is family culture. I think what I could say is family culture. I don't know that I'm going to be good at giving a definition like you know, but I would say that it's important that a child is grounded in a family culture and family traditions and intentional family traditions, because that's one of the things that comes from that family stories is that he talks about developing family traditions. He says, make them really goofy, like make them really distinctive. And he also said, yeah, make them hokey. And then
The hokier the better.
then make sure you tell stories about your family members, retell them, especially stories of how they overcame adversity.
What was the name of the author again?
Robin Fivush, F as in Frank I, V as in Victor, U, S as in Sam H. And they developed a do you know scale, set of 20 questions about their family. And they found out that the more children knew about their family's history, the stronger their sense of control over their lives, the higher their self-esteem, and the more successfully they believed their families functioned. The do you know scale turned out to be the best single predictor of children's emotional health and happiness. So that's why I say a family culture is really important. And I don't know if I can honestly answer like what is family culture, or it just seems to me like it's all the things that make your family special.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that you need to be intentional about. I believe, that strong family traditions will help to porn-proof your kids, because when they understand that the real love of families is not portrayed in pornography, right?
Yes.
Then they will be more resilient to say no to porn.
When our kids can observe healthy behaviors, then they can become sensitized to when they notice unhealthy behaviors.
Right.
And they can be prepared to know that's, if they see porn or they see abuse, they can say, oh, that's not right, because they have been able to witness good behavior and healthy behavior. They see the way that their parents interact and say, that's the way a man treats a woman if they are healthy.
Because the point is this. It's not just seeing nudity that's going to hurt your kids or entice them, or even sexual acts. It's the fact that you're watching people take advantage of another person. You're watching people objectify each other. You're watching something that you're using. I don't know. It's not just the nudity. It's really, it's the objectification that happens.
And there's a lot to that, because when kids see behaviors modeled, did you know that Bobo the clown study where they had the they had that toy, that you punch it and it bounces back?
Oh, yes.
You know what I'm talking about? So they had that study, and they wondered if kids would mimic behaviors that they witness. And they put this Bobo the clown in the playroom. And at first the kids might just they might walk past it and bump it. But for the most part, it was really, they ignored it. But then they showed the kids videos of people really wailing on this thing, like even taking a mallet, they were just going at this thing. And then they studied what the kids did after they witnessed this, and they did the exact same thing. They modeled that behavior.
Yeah.
And so that's, it matters. The things that we model and things that our kids see. Well, they don't have anybody else telling them what is appropriate behavior. You just have to be able to talk about it and demonstrate just kindness and respect for each other and things like that.
And pornography teaches 180 degrees away from kindness and respect.
Yes.
that's what we need to teach our children, that, pornography is not kind. Pornography is not respectful. Pornography is using people as things and not as people to love.
So the next question I wanted to ask you then is, what does shame culture mean? This contradiction to our intentional culture, but you can intentionally have a shame culture, right? So how do we avoid, what is shame culture? How can we avoid that?
Well, obviously, we want to define what shame is, right? And how it may be different from guilt. Shame, what I've heard is, sounds good to me, is that, guilt is like, I did something wrong, but shame is, I'm a bad person.
Yeah.
And so kids make mistakes all the time, and we make mistakes all the time. But if we talk to a child and when they made a mistake and we shame them, then we're basically saying, you're a bad kid. You're a bad kid for doing this. You're a bad kid for making this mistake. And in both of our books, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, and Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior, we very intentionally try to reduce the shame a child might feel, because pornography is shameful, but talking about it is not shameful. And even for a child to be curious is not shameful. It's normal. And if parents understand that and realize that their kid is not bad if they're curious, then we can actually get something done here.
Yeah.
We can't really make much inroads, or we can't really influence a child positively if we're shaming that child. And, we all slip up as parents. I remember times when, and often shaming is also more about us than about the child. So we're like, I remember one time when one of my children, we just moved to a new area, new school, and she forgot her homework. And like, I took it personally. What are they going to think about us? What are they going to think about your parents? You forgot your homework. Well, that was ridiculous for me to do that. So shaming is often about like how we're embarrassed, right? We'll be embarrassed, and really we need to cut through that and see that children need to know that they can feel bad about doing something, but there's a second chance.
Because shame, it motivates you to hide and to put away and do those things in darkness and justify that, well, this is just the way I am, but I don't want anybody to find out about it. It doesn't open up the conversation about it. I like to refer to this story of the drummer from Neon Trees. She told this story about how when she and her husband were first married, they were driving through Las Vegas for their honeymoon, and there's all these billboards everywhere. And she's just like, oh, I don't know why anybody would do that, or why they would, give into that type of temptation. Meanwhile, her husband had a pornography addiction or some kind of a addiction. And so he started to think, oh, I can't talk to her about this now. And so our conversation or our dialogue is shaming, then it shuts down that conversation to be able to open up and be open to express our concerns and our feelings about it. Right. And so we have to be open.
And to tell kids, oh, people who look at porn are awful, horrible people. Well, if your kids have ever been at least curious or exposed to it and curious, they'll get that message. Oh, I would be a bad person to ever be interested in this. And I think that, again, in Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, we really try to tamp that down by saying, it's normal for kids to be curious, and some kids are curious about pornography. So we don't want to actually demonize any child that has ever been curious about seeing people without clothes on. That is a normal human biological response. But there are problems with looking at pornography. We need to focus on that, not on shaming children.
That's one of the things I really liked about your book. I read the Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, and I really like that, it talks about the different parts of your brain and how, the attraction center is this normal part of your brain, and that pornography kind of entices that part of your brain and the feeling part of your brain. but that we need to exercise the thinking part of our brain to kind of keep that under control and not go crazy about it. So I really do. I love that aspect of it, is that we're talking about this is just part of our normal development, and that it's a practice to learn how to control the urges and the enticement that we
Right.
feel.
I often tell people that the feeling part of the brain is where our drives are. And so that's like the gas pedal. And the thinking part of the brain is like the brakes,
Yeah.
right? So that's where we learn right from wrong. That's where we can remember the consequences of our decisions and our behaviors. So that's why the thinking brain is the one that needs to make the decisions about what we look at, not the feeling brain.
Yeah. And I like that you basically refer to it as a practice, that your thinking part of your brain can get stronger. I read this other book, Switch, by Chip and Dan Heath, and they refer to your feeling brain as an elephant, and the thinking part of your brain is the driver of the elephant. And so in that perspective, it was just like, oh, you're never going to be able to overpower your feeling part of your brain. But it's not that way. Your thinking part of your brain is like a muscle, in a way that you can develop that, and you can strengthen it to make it a practice to become more and more and more conscious of when your feeling brain starts to manifest and take over, to strengthen that part of your brain.
Yeah, because an addiction is when the feeling brain is in charge.
Yeah.
When it hijacks the rest of the brain. And we all, if you know an addict, you know that they do things without thinking. And you're like, what were they thinking when they did that?
They weren't.
They weren't using. And in fact, if you look at MRI studies, they've done MRI studies of the brains of addicts, and they can tell that prefrontal cortex, that thinking brain part, has shrunk. And this is across all addictions, whether it's substance or pornography or gambling or anything. It is the same, because, if you don't use it, you lose it. And addicts are not using their thinking brain. They're just going. They have an impulse and they follow it. And so that's why it's so important to teach our children. We live in such an addictive culture.
Yes.
And there are so many ways to become addicted, whether it's to games, whether it's to just online social media, checking your phone constantly, whether it's to other things like gambling or pornography or addictions of, substance.
Yeah.
We need to understand, and we need to teach our children how the brain develops an addiction so that they can then know how to not develop an addiction, right?
Yes. So I wanted, before we go into that, I have one more segue that you reminded me of that I wanted to touch on. So some people think that if you want to combat this, you just train your feeling part of your brain to develop different neural pathways. So then your habits become natural. There's this book, The Power of Habit, and it talks about how our habits, and it goes into the addiction of gambling, especially, it went into that there is a trigger, and then there's a behavior, and there's a reward.
Right.
And so when you notice the trigger, the goal is to then change the behavior that still gives you the reward. And so, but in some ways, that takes, that's not just going, okay, well, I'll just create new habits and then that will take me on a new neural pathway. You have to use your thinking brain and your conscious brain to create those new behaviors. When you notice a trigger, you have to know it. You have to know that it's there in order to change the behavior and get the reward.
The way we talk about that in Good Pictures, Bad Pictures is that when a child sees an image or a video, it will come back. It'll keep popping back into their mind because it's so traumatizing, really. It's so shocking. And so how do children forget, and I put that in air quotes, forget pornographic images, because you can't actually entirely flush your brain. Like you can flush your body of toxins, but you can't flush your brain of images.
Right.
So how can you do that? Well, we teach with the can-do plan in the Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, what to do when those images come flooding back. And that is to focus on something else that is emotionally exciting to the child. So if your child is really interested in horses, then that's, what we want to do. When a video or an image floods back into their mind and it bothers them, then what they need to do is think about, change their focus to something that they're interested in. So if they're interested in ponies or horses or cars or trucks or whatever, then they think about that. For example, I love to go snorkeling and see the beautiful tropical fish. So when I have an image that's bothering me, that's what I do. And it doesn't work the first time, because what you're doing is you're trying to rebuild a different neural connection.
Yes.
You're trying to, that connection that goes to that shocking image, you're kind of trying to let it grow over with weeds. So it gets weakened and you focus on something different. People have asked me, but wait a minute, then every time you see tropical fish, don't you think of porn? And I don't. It doesn't seem to go backwards. I don't think.
Well, another thing I would say about that too is that if you engage your thinking brain, then you can also redirect the same neural, to get away from and
well, that's what you're doing.
Exactly.
That's exactly what you're doing. You're using your thinking brain, but it'll take 5 or 10 times of practice. So the child needs to learn. But again, all of this is strengthening their thinking brain. And it is a cognitive skill that children living in the digital age need to develop.
Yes. Tell us more about why we need to talk to our kids early on about pornography.
Because pornography is kind of like air pollution. I mean, it is everywhere. And their access to it is unprecedented. And so, for example, when our children learn to walk, we start to warn them about not running out into the street. Don't run out into the street. Hold mommy's hand. Always stop at the curb, because there are cars that could run you over and you could get hurt, right? Mm-hmm. Well, when our kids are old enough that they can go to the internet, superhighways, right? When they can get online, then we need to start to warn them. So that's why we wrote Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior. I had so many parents asking me to write a younger version. And the first time I got asked, it felt like a sucker punch to the gut. And I'm like, because she's like, well, can you write something for a 3-year-old or a preschooler? And I'm like, what? I thought 7 was young. But then as I did more research, I'm like, of course, because they're all on mom's phones, their iPads, tablets, Kindles even. So, and even the most child-friendly apps that say rated for age 4, right? There are predators in those live chat rooms that are looking for children to engage with. So it's so important that we help children to understand 3 things. 1, what pornography is. Just give them a simple definition. We don't have to give it to them all, just something that they can recognize it, right? So we say pornography is pictures, videos, or cartoons of people with little or no clothes on that focus on the private parts of the body we keep covered with a swimsuit. That's the definition that we pretty much use in both books. Number 2, you've got to give children a heads up that this can be dangerous. It's not just entertainment. It's not harmless, but that pornography can be addicting. It can change the way we think about people. And so it's like a picture poison. And then 3rd, we have to give kids a plan, what to do when they see pornography, so that they know what to do. And part of what to do is to come and tell mom or dad or a trusted adult and tell us what you saw. And then we will not react freak out or anything. We will be calm. We won't take their devices away. We won't not let them play with the kid next door. We will be calm and think about things before we react to those, confessions or admissions.
They need to be teaching opportunities, not shaming opportunities.
Right.
So why aren't filters good enough on our devices then? I mean, if mom has a filter on her phone and her iPad, why isn't that enough?
Well, filters are awesome. I recommend filters or accountability software as they get a little older. Covenant Eyes is one that we have recommended in the past. Circle by Disney. There's all kinds of those things. And that's great because I think that families need to all come together and say, hey, we are going to filter our internet. We're going to, because all of us together are going to work together as a family. And this is just one of those things. There are guardrails on streets and roads where there are cliffs, and this is a guardrail for us. We don't want to fall down that cliff. We want to protect not only the children, but the adults, all of us. And that's why in Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, our original book, my favorite picture is at the end where all the parents and the kids are all standing around with signs that are basically encouraging the child, saying, we are all in this together. We're proud of you. You can do it. Way to go. And it's all this encouragement as a family. So filters are a great tool. However, kids are very resourceful. And it's amazing how they can get around filters and how sometimes filters are not adequate because they may filter a browser, but if you have an app on that phone or that device, most apps have backdoors to the internet and even Google Maps. And once you get onto the internet, then there are no iron doors, so they can go wherever they want. So that's the problem. The only problem I see with filters is that it can give you a false sense of security.
Yes, I was just going to say that. Yep.
And then what happens when they walk out the door? Like I've had people say, well, I'm very careful where my kids go. I have a story of a mom who, same way, she homeschooled her kids. She was super uber careful about who her children played with. Well, a new family moved in down the street, and this kid, they had a boy that was the same age as her son, and they got to be friends very quickly. And this boy said, oh, let's go get my bike so we can go bike riding. So the child asked his mom, hey, can we just go down and get his bike? And she's like, okay, just quickly, like not going inside to play, because I haven't, done a background check on these people, right? So not going inside to play, just go get the bike and come back. Well, they went, and I don't know why they went inside, but they did quickly go inside. And in those few moments, the older brothers said, hey, come over, I want to show you something, and exposed this little 7-year-old boy to pornography. So the good thing is they'd already read our books, and he knew exactly what to do. He recognized what it was. He knew what to do, and he went back and he's told his mom, and she helped him process that experience. The only filter that will go with your child 24/7 is the internal filter that you help them develop. And you help them develop that filter by talking to them openly and honestly about what pornography is, why it's harmful, and how they can reject it with a plan. And you don't have to use the can-do plan in Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. You can come up with your own plan as long as it's memorable and you practice it and the child knows what's expected. Young children want to please their parents. And if you can teach them as a young child, then you asked about like how young, and I've been asked that question, right? Like, how young should I start? Should I start when they're 13 or 15? I'm like, no, how about take the 10 away?
Yeah.
Minus 10. And let's go to 3, 5, 7, because that's when they have any access to the internet, that's when they need to have at least a gentle warning about safety.
And they already need to have the tools and the vocabulary. The kids need to know even body parts, or be open to this conversation that these are our bodies, and this is who we are.
Mhm.
We don't give funny names to our private parts and things like that, because
Right.
that isn't that even a resource that predators do use to like groom kids, is name their body parts with funny names and things like that. So from a very young age,
so true.
you just using the proper terms for their body parts is another way to help prepare them. And then, like you said, just having these conversations.
Right. It's so important. Pornography is used to groom children. And pornography, unfortunately, is turning children into perpetrators. Children are wired to imitate what they see adults do. So if children see pornography, it is quite natural for them to then want to imitate what they've seen, and they do it with the people that are closest to them, which is usually siblings or cousins or close friends. So that's the issue. And so what happens is there was a family, and they had a 3-year-old daughter, and there was a 14-year-old boy who happened to be a member of their church, and he groomed them, the whole family. They just loved him. And what he did was gain their trust so that he could gain access to that 3-year-old child. And now this mother had told her daughter and taught her daughter about her private parts, and was able to, you have a vagina, that's totally, but she didn't think to teach her young daughter about the private parts of boys.
Mm-hmm.
So when the little girl complained that she didn't like it when he poked her with his stick, the mother just did not figure it out.
Oh man. Yeah.
And this mother was actually fairly trained in this kind of thing. So she did not see it. And she goes, "Oh, just tell him to stop." She thought it was just silliness. And it was months later when they found out that, his stick was his penis. So if that little girl had said, "I don't like it when he pokes me with his penis," bam, that would have been all over, and it would have been a one-time thing, and it would have still been horrible, but it wouldn't have gone on for months and months. So again, we need to help our kids to be resilient. We need to help our kids to protect themselves. Now, it used to be parents could do all the protecting of children, but in this day and age, unfortunately, children need to be taught, they're not responsible for what adults do, but they can be taught some protective measures, not only with body safety, but with pornography as well. Because again, if someone shows them pornography, that should be a red flag.
Yeah. Yes.
That person might be grooming them to normalize it, so that the child is more willing to go along with being abused.
Yes. Well, and something you said earlier too was about how that porn is predatory. It's not anymore that you can say, "Oh, my kid is never going to see it," because they're not going to seek it out. But pornography seeks them
out. Yeah. Pornography is a predator. Pornography and the whole industry, they hire the best and the brightest just to figure out more ways to get to people. It used to be pornography was really, all marketed to men. Now, and then I guess one day some porn executive woke up and thought, "What are we doing? We've got 50% of the population we could be exploiting."
Oh dear.
We need to go after women. And so now it's, the statistic that I have read is that 40% of American women say they use pornography, at least on occasion. So if pornography is now being marketed to women, it's a girl problem as well as a boy problem. We can't just say, "Well, I'll focus on my boys." I mean, I have so many people come up and say, oh, we need your book because I've got 5 sons. And it's like, well, if you had 5 daughters, it would really
still
be the same thing, because in some ways we're kind of leaving our girls more vulnerable.
Yeah.
I did a little focus group with teens, and there were several boys and a few girls, and I asked them, what kind of phones they had. All the boys, like, oh my gosh, their parents were like on this. They were like, oh, we only have a flip phone, or we only have, and the girls both were like 14 years old. They had iPhones or smartphones. They had all the apps. They were on Instagram, Instaporn, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They were on all these social media. And when I asked them, dug a little deeper, they're like, yeah, there's some bad stuff on there. Those girls had seen it. They had access to it. They had more access to it than the boys.
Yeah.
At least from that one little group. So it's really important to know that this is not just a boys' problem anymore. It's a girl's problem. Now, girls will sometimes start by reading like erotic literature, right? Romance. And they'll start that way, but they always seem to go and end up with video. Now, sometimes girls that have been raped and sexually abused actually go to the rape porn because what they're trying to do is normalize the trauma that they experienced. And by watching it, it somehow says, well, you know what? This isn't so bad. And this woman looks like she's enjoying it. So maybe it wasn't as bad as it felt at the time. Yeah, so important to prepare our children. Give them a chance. Give them a heads up. When kids are caught off guard with porn, they're very likely to be pulled into it. If you give them a heads up, give them the tools they need, it's such a gift. It's such a gift.
Well, because it is so addicting and so, but if you can talk about it as like, okay, that's stimulating your attraction center. Just be able to say that in and of itself is like, that opens up the conversation. Yeah. Yes, it's stimulating your attraction center so that you can have a healthy relationship when it's time.
Right.
Just that alone. And then saying, so here's some resources to help you so that you don't have to keep going back to it or so that you can get it under control.
And just having that conversation and knowing that you can come and talk to your mom or dad. I talked to one mom who had, really mentored her children and had that open relationship with them. In fact, she would call it M&M meetings with her kids. It was mom and me, and she would bring a handful of M&Ms or a little package, and they would just sit and eat M&Ms and talk about the week. And she wasn't even overweight. So I'm like, how did that happen that you are eating all these M&Ms over so many years? Maybe she went and did exercise right afterwards. Right. But anyway, she told me about how her son went off to college. He called her. He said, Mom, I'm just really struggling right now with lust. And the fact that she could talk to her 17 or 18-year-old son and be that open and that he could reach out to her and say, I'm struggling, I just need to talk it out with you and get some strength. What a beautiful, beautiful, that is a beautiful example. Because you know what? If you want to think that your kids are going to be like perfectly immune to pornography because they're good kids and maybe you take them to church every week or maybe whatever your practices are, your faith practices. Unfortunately, what I've seen is that children need to not only have, the faith and the understanding, but specific understanding about how pornography affects the brain, and also a friend, someone that they can work through, someone like a mentor.
Yeah.
And so I would say the goal is that your kids come to you and say, Mom, or Dad, I'm struggling here a little bit. Like someone showed me something and I can't get the image out of my mind. And I really am curious. Wow, to be able to be that open. That's the goal. Not like the goal is not, oh, my child will never ever look or ever be interested because I'm such a good parent. No, that's not the goal, because that's a false expectation.
Yeah. And I like the word mentor, because that's something that I've been thinking a lot about lately myself, is what a mentor does is that, when you go and you're experiencing a new culture, basically, I mean, these kids are growing into adult culture earlier and earlier and earlier. And so they need an adult that can walk them through the rules and the expectation and the language and what is appropriate and inappropriate, because everybody that's experiencing a transition to a new culture needs a mentor. If you were coming to a new country, you would want to meet somebody who knows something about that culture so that they can be there by your side to walk you through what the cultural expectations are, what is culturally appropriate, inappropriate, what is the language and the terms and all that stuff. And that's what we are as parents. We are their mentors into the adult culture, and to help them understand what is appropriate behaviors and what's not, and to be able to just talk about it. That would be a miracle if we could all just talk about it,
right.
about all of this stuff.
Right. And if some of this stuff makes you feel uncomfortable, go practice. Practice in your shower, practice with a friend, because the more you say the words, the more comfortable you are with them.
Yeah.
And when I speak, I often say, okay, everyone, say the word pornography on the count of 3, pornography. I said, see, you're still here. Nobody died. Nobody fainted. It's okay. We need to own this word.
Yeah.
And we need to do that so that we can, bring pornography out of the dark where it has power into the light where our kids have power.
So next, I really want to go into now more of the tools and resources that you are trying to coach, that we as mentors can use, some of the language and things that we can use to open up these conversations. You were talking about, you mentioned before about tech etiquette and having a motto. So I want you to tell us about that and then go into more about that.
Okay. So there's a couple of things on our website, protectyoungminds.org. We have a variety of resources that are free that we've developed over the years to help families parent and help parents parent in the digital age. So one of them is developing your own family standards about technology and their use within your family. So for example, we have an article on tech etiquette, and we also have a worksheet that you can use to develop your own tech etiquette. And tech etiquette, what I mean by that is how you use technology. So for example, I would recommend that families develop a motto that describes how you're going to use technology in your family. So here's my motto. In our family, we thoughtfully and intentionally use technology to improve our lives. We don't allow technology to rule or damage our relationships. So that's my motto. You can borrow that, make your own, whatever. And again, it's in the article, and we can probably provide a link for your audience. Tech Etiquette, a lesson for the digital family. The next thing is to develop specific guidelines. So family rules, for example, time limits, bedtime, are kids allowed in their rooms with devices, obviously some of this is just basic safety, what information should be shared online. But when friends come over to the house, I have heard of mothers, they have a basket, and when the kids come in, put your device in the basket. You don't need to use it. You're going to be doing something. You don't need your phone, but it's here, right? You can talk about that. Again, for example, if you're talking with someone and someone calls you on the phone, like I've had this happen to me. I'll be in a conversation with a family member, their phone rings, and then guess what? That's the end of our conversation because their phone. So I'm like, if that's okay with you, that's fine. But it's something that I think you have to intentionally discuss. Very careful, be very mindful of how you use your device, because how you use your device is teaching your children a lot about what you think about them versus the device, how distractible you are. All of this feeds into how we use our devices. And it's the devices that kids use to get to this more exciting world,
Yeah.
than their own family,
I
which
was
is
just,
sad.
yeah,
Right?
well, it's true though that it's like the device itself lends to this addictive culture, right? Where it's like, oh, we're in an uncomfortable situation. Let me just diffuse it by looking at my phone, or you know what I mean? Or
And
I feel uncomfortable because I need something to stimulate. So I need to look at it.
it's that whole thing with dopamine. It's
Hmm.
the same thing. Dopamine, you get a rush of dopamine, you see something new on your news feed, whatever. Again, if we're aware of that, then we can take awareness is the first step.
Yeah.
Then we can take steps to be intentional, to intentionally use technology for our good and to intentionally keep it from hurting us. Another thing that we provide is on Protect Young Minds
Hmm.
is family media standards. So not only like the devices, but like what are you consuming? What kind of media do we as a family want to consume and want to vote for? So for example, again, you want to develop a media value statement. And we have this free downloadable guide, My Family Media Standards. And the value statement, for example, could be in our family, again, we thoughtfully and intentionally choose media and online content to improve our lives. We carefully select the images, words, and music we allow into our hearts and minds. That's just one motto. You can come up with something different that will basically set, the values of, because if you don't have a gateway, if you don't have some filtering system, then, everything is up for grabs. Everything is just like, oh yeah, that looks nice. I mean, when my kids were young and there would be some new Disney film out, I would really carefully look at that Disney film. Like, what were the messages?
Yeah.
That was feeding, because did I want my kids watching it over and over and over again? Which if we bought it, then they would, right? So the first step is develop a media value statement. The second step is discuss the ways that your family will decide which media to use to entertain and inform you. So for example, here's a couple of statements. Our family watches and votes for media that does not objectify men nor women. Pornography objectifies people.
Yes.
And you can hurt something if it's an object. If it's it's much easier to punch a doll than a real human person, right? So if it's an inanimate, if people are seen to be kind of objects instead of real people with feelings, objectification is just really bad.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
Yeah. Well, and it's everywhere. And the way they touch up images almost make women especially, and men, I'm sure, look like inhuman, just superhuman almost. And like, but that makes them into something that's not real.
Right. So it's all about fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
So another one is like, our family does not vote for or watch media that promotes bigotry. Our family does not watch media that is sexually arousing. Our family does not watch or vote for media that glorifies violence. Our family is sensitive to the language that is used in media. So these are just some examples. You can come up with your own. And then once you've got the ideas or once you've developed those standards with your family of the kind of media that you want to watch and the kind of media you don't want to watch, then you need to start discussing the media that you do watch. For example, help your children to decode the underlying messages and decide if you want to accept them or not. I call it chew it up and spit out the bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you may watch something that you think is good and then you're like, you know what? I didn't like the way, like I'm going to give an example. I hope I don't offend anybody, but The Little Mermaid, the Disney version of The Little Mermaid. Oh my gosh, she gives away her voice just for some guy that she doesn't even know because he's what?
Yeah.
What kind of a message is that sending to girls? You need to give up your most amazing talents or hide your talents. You actually need to be less than you are to get the guy.
Right.
You need to be something less, something different. being you is not good enough. And the fact that her dad just like went into her place and wrecked all her, I mean, that was just terrible. There's so many bad messages in that video. I would not let my kids watch it.
Well, I love that like I like that you're putting these things into words, and you're bringing them up as like, this is what is happening, because I think a lot of us, we just mind-numbingly watch all of this stuff and go, oh, that was entertaining, and not really realizing the messages that it's sending.
Yes.
So it's important to bring those things up and to be, intentionally aware of them and have that language, have that understanding, because I think that's part of the problem is this, oh, it's just harmless entertainment. It's not. You have to be aware.
It's not. But you can have some good conversations.
Yes.
You can look at the hero. Is the hero good? Maybe imperfect, but are they good, and do they conquer evil in the end? What can we learn from the mistakes of the hero and other characters? Did any of the characters grow or change or become better or learn something important? And were there any specific messages promoted in this media that we agree with or disagree with?
Yeah.
Now, so that doesn't mean that, everything that you watch has to be 100% perfect and in alignment. Sometimes if you watch something and it turns out to be not in alignment, you can get some really good conversations.
Yeah.
Now, this just happened recently. You know that movie Show Dogs?
I heard of it.
Have you heard of it?
I saw everything that went viral about it.
The furor. Yes. Well, it started really with, at least what I saw, there was a mom. She had taken her kids to see it, and she wrote a blog post about it. And she said, I don't like the way the dog is made to, undergo this, basically the examination of his private parts. He did not like it. He did not want it. And yet they basically said, oh, go to your Zen place. You have to do. It was like the perfect example of grooming children for sexual abuse. And when she brought this up, everyone was like, oh, that's right. Oh my gosh. Now it's so clear. Right. And so that whole, they basically, that went on, became viral, and the movie was pulled and recut. Yeah. So I haven't seen the new movie, but she said she actually had a really good conversation with her kids about the wrong messages in that video.
Yeah. On one hand, I think that that's absolutely right. Like to not necessarily shelter our kids 100%. Right? Because we need to be able to have those conversations. I don't think that I would be aware of what needs to be brought up unless we encounter some of this stuff. But on the other hand, it's like we shouldn't have to expose our kids in order for them to understand it either.
No. But you know what?
There's a balance, right?
Yeah. But see, that's the beauty of great art and literature is oftentimes it shows evil. And I do, some people have gotten after me because, good and bad is in my title, but I'm sorry. There is good and there is bad, and there's good media and there's bad media. But the great thing about great literature, great art is that, yes, it can show the bad stuff. So you don't actually have to experience it yourself. Now, that's not saying you should go and watch pornography, because pornography is not art.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, evil is something that can be discussed and we can teach our children. But again, when you watch something, like I would always take my kids to the latest Disney film. Okay, we'll go see it once, and we talk about it. But if I noticed that if I didn't like the hero, if I felt like it was sending really bad messages, like Little Mermaid, then I would say, you know what? You saw it, fine. Now you don't feel left out. But guess what? We're not going to buy it, so you can watch it 1,000 times before you're age 18. So I really feel like you can do those kinds of things. This is all under digital citizenship, media literacy. Media literacy is a term that nobody likes. Nobody even knows what it means. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it's just helping your children decode the messages that are coming at them in all forms of media, including advertising. And if you can help them, they will have a truly have a leg up. And again, decoding messages and teaching children that in pornography, there are lies that are told. Pornography shows people being mean to each other. Pornography objectifies people, and it is addicting. Those messages will help children have a strong reason to look away, because if they don't have a strong reason, the odds are is that their curiosity will get the better of them. They need good reasons, and they need someone to mentor them and be open with them.
Yes.
I plead with parents, start early. When you start early, they don't have the context of how horrible pornography is.
Yeah.
And it's not awkward.
Yeah. And they draw from you what you are demonstrating about your feelings. If you're being awkward about it, then they're going to think they need to be awkward about it. But when you start with them young and you're talking about these things as this is a conversation, we're learning the language and we're learning how to be aware.
Yeah.
Then there doesn't need to be awkwardness about it.
Yeah. You can teach children that are very young, and it's not as, you may feel awkward inside, and that's okay. That's all right. This is new, different world. But the younger you start, the easier it will be to continue these conversations, and you have to continue them. It's not a one and done. The more you continue these conversations, the stronger they will be, the more resilient they will be, and the more they will know that they have you to talk to. And that's a gift. I heard a mom say that she wrote about this actually on Facebook, where she said that she had read Good Pictures, Bad Pictures to her 9-year-old son. He went to school a few days later and someone showed him pornography. He came home and he told his mom, he said, "Mom, I was scared, but I knew what to do."
Yeah.
I knew what to do. And what a gift.
Yes.
Give a child, a script, like, here's a danger, here's what you do. We do this for other dangers, The biggest danger in their lives, some of the biggest dangers are online dangers. We need to prepare them. No child deserves to face the porn industry alone.
What I love about your resource too is that you're providing a mentor for us. You're providing us the language. You're providing us with the awareness and the conversations and the tools to be able to know how to react to those situations, because it is scary and it can feel scary to us. Our kids are scared. We're scared, and so it's nice to know that there are resources for us to be able to know what to say and how to react.
Yeah, the whole purpose of Good Pictures, Bad Pictures and Protect Young Minds is to help parents start these conversations at a young age when it will really make a difference.
Yeah.
Now, if your kids are 13 or 14 and you haven't had these conversations, better to have them now, right? But the sooner, the safer. Sooner is safer. And I understand parents think, well, what if I start talking about this and it piques their curiosity and then they go out and look for it? It's like, well, but if you've told them how it can be dangerous, how it can be harmful, if you've given them a heads up, then they know about it, because that's your only nexus of control. Is when you start educating your child about the real dangers that they may find or that may find them, right? That's really your only nexus of control, is when you start those conversations and how open you are, because you cannot control when they are going to be exposed. I was just at Florida. I was in Florida at a huge homeschooling convention, and I heard about the story of a 6-year-old boy, went to church, and I believe this was the pastor's son, actually, was at church and was shown pornography by another 6-year-old boy with a device at church on Sunday.
Right.
Like, if you cannot feel safe in that situation, then you know that, like, the only way is to inoculate your children so that when they are exposed, they know exactly how to deal with that exposure and what to do, and especially to come to you. One mom told me how she had her 2 girls were playing at a friend's house, And she went to pick them up, and they were both in the front yard, and the little friend was showing them something on her phone. And these kids were young, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9. The two girls get in the car, and the mom says, "What was she showing you on your phone?" And they looked at each other, and one of them said, "Oh, it was just a My Little Pony video." She lied.
Oh.
She lied because she didn't know how to describe what she saw.
Mm.
Several months later, her mom read her Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, and this little girl said, Mom, remember when we told you that it was a My Little Pony video? It wasn't. She showed us pornography. And what the mother said to me was, they didn't have the vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have the permission or the vocabulary to talk about it with me.
Mm.
And so when you open these conversations, you're setting yourself up as the expert. You're saying, hey, I'm your friend, I'm your expert, I'm your mentor, I'm your parent. You come to me when you have a question. Now, another tip is when kids hear something outside of the home, and if they go to public school, if they hear something like a phrase, or if they go to a sporting event or, play sports or wherever, and they hear some phrase or term that they don't understand what it is, you need to teach them to come and ask you, not to Google it, because they'll want to Google it because that's what they see us doing, right?
Yeah.
Train your children to come to you when they hear a word or phrase that they don't know the meaning of. Mm-hmm. Because no kid wants to be that kid that's uninformed, right? Mm-hmm. Because then they'll become the butt of the jokes, right? So it's embarrassing not to be in the know. So they need to be in the know, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, so many of these terms that they may hear are sexual. And if they look them up, it will lead them to pornography. So we need to put on our big girl pants, big boy pants, and say, I will look it up, and go to the Urban Dictionary, whatever.
Yeah.
You find it, and then you can find a way to tell your child what it means.
Yeah. I like that you said that it gives them permission to come to you. That is such a good way of putting it. That it's like, no, you have permission to come to me and talk about these things. It's okay. Mm-hmm. I want to bring up one other book if I can. This book is called Hold On to Your Kids. And it's about how parents need to be the ones to orient our kids. When kids become peer oriented, they go down unknown paths. And it's like the blind leading the blind. And so we need to be the ones who are orienting our children. We need to be the ones that it's an attachment type of mentality that they're attached to us, because when they become peer attached, then they want to please their peers. But when they're parent attached, they want to please us, and they want us to give our approval, and to be able to give them that permission is like saying, even if this is uncomfortable, you have permission to come talk to me, and you still will have my approval and my love and my appreciation that you came to me.
That's why I wrote read aloud books.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to ask a parent to read, read this parenting book on pornography, and then now translate it all into exactly, the words that will not be too much and not be too, it's like, we did the work for you.
Yeah.
And we actually had a lot of input from parents. So that's one reason, again, so you can become the person that teaches your child why pornography is harmful and how to deal with it, and not just let them deal with it by themselves because you think, oh, maybe they won't ever see it. And I want to put in one more thing, and that is, talk to your kids about sex. Mm-hmm. Don't wait so long. You're not going to ruin their innocence. We live in a hypersexualized culture. And no matter how much you try to protect your children from those messages, they're coming at them.
They're everywhere. Yeah.
And they don't just bounce off. So many times we think, it's above their heads. They won't know what is really going on. But so many of these little arrows, they go in. I did a series of interviews with porn addicts earlier this year. And the one thing they all had in common, and they were 8 men and 2 women, was that they did not have parents who would talk to them openly about sex. So, guess what? Kids they're wired to try to figure these things out. They have to figure out their world. And when their world is sending them all these sexualized messages, they've got to figure out, like, what is that? Like, what's going on? What is it, that thing that adults do? I know that they're doing something, and I have to figure it out. So if you haven't opened up this conversation with them, then guess what they're going to do? They're going to go online and figure it out, or go to their peers, like you said, and ask them. I had one situation well, there was this one young man that we talked to, and he said that he had started seeing I guess it was like Victoria's Secret catalogs that were coming to his house. And he would grab that catalog, sneak off with it, tear out the page that he liked the best. And he had a collection of these pictures. He was 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He hid them under his Thomas the Train set. Okay? Now, that to me is like horrifying, because here's this little boy, but he's already being sexualized, right?
Well, and he's already feeling those sensations, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't think that kids aren't feeling these sensations, and then, but on the other hand, you can't go, oh well, they're just being kids, or let them experiment with that stuff. It's like, no, we need to teach them what is an appropriate behavior, and what attraction is, and why we feel those things.
Right. So again, children can be sexualized. They shouldn't be, but they can be. And so let's talk to them. We just recently had a blog post on Protect Young Minds about 8 different books that you could get to help you have these conversations about sex with children. And I would say earlier is better. Earlier is better. One young man that we talked to said that he had found out from a neighbor boy what sex was. And it was like on the way home from school, he was like, do you know how it happens? You know how babies are born? And he gave this, crude, rough, whatever explanation. And his sister was kind of nearby, and she went and told mom, so-and-so was talking about sex, blah, blah, blah. And so the mother came to him and said, did you, I need to have this conversation with you about, how babies are born. And he said, Mom, I know all about it. Don't worry about it. And it was almost like, oh, good. Phew. I don't have to worry about that anymore, because he knows. But the thing is this, it's not just the mechanical, physical act of sex that you want to talk to them about. It's everything else about sex that, you have to be able and the ideal. And, not every parent has a wonderful sex life. There are problems in marriages. I get that. But if you can hold up an ideal for your child to strive for, that's a beautiful gift.
Yes. Thank you for that thought. It's something that's like, put it out there. But I like that. Would you say it's not just about, if you set the tone, it's about your culture, the conversations, the values, and it all it's about your intimacy too. Mm-hmm. It's not just about the way that we treat each other. It's or the language. It's all of that. And if you can talk about sex too in that conversation, that comes back to what is normal, what is what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, what is consent, what is what is just the purpose of the intimacy of itself.
Right. Well, so, and in Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, we have, like you talked about, the attraction center. We never say the word sex. Mm-hmm. And so you can read this to a child, and you don't have to have the sex conversation. You don't have to begin that conversation, because they will be exposed. They can be exposed to pornography long before you would feel comfortable having that, or even before they have questions that would lead up to it. Yeah. But in this chapter on the attraction center, that is actually, even though it doesn't really describe anything about sex, that is actually a great lead in to those conversations
Yes. Yes.
Might be
Yeah.
helpful.
When I was going to read your book, because it's like, when people are like, teach your kids about pornography, it's like, oh, that's really scary, that thought. And so I was just like, do I want to read this? I don't know. But I read it and it was just like, this is very doable. This is something that was like, I could have this conversation with my 5 and 7 year olds and 3-year-old even
Mhm.
to just make them aware. And it's
Mhm.
not something that was like is going to destroy their innocence or anything like that. And
No.
so it was very comforting that after I read it, I was like, I could definitely read this to my
Yes.
kids.
Yeah.
And it wasn't scary anymore.
Yeah.
And so I really love that.
That's awesome. That's what we
Thank
want to
you.
do. Take the fear factor out and give parents the confidence and the words that they can use,
Yes.
that they can do this. You can do this. I know you can.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Kristen, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation and something that is so important. And so I know you have lots of resources on your website, including the books. What other resources can we find on your website?
So if you go to protectyoungminds.org, we have a wonderful blog that we come out with every week. And it really covers a wide variety of subjects, but it all pertains to protecting children from sexual exploitation.
Yeah.
And sexual exploitation can be anything from child abuse to, pornography to a child, that is sexual exploitation. Then we have, of course, other resources. We have a lot of downloadable guides, so conversation starters, or even things to help you and your child with emotional awareness, so that children can begin to name their emotions and develop a plan for how to meet their emotional needs. And we do this because so many people get into addictive behaviors because they don't know how to deal with their negative emotions. So if we can help children, that is something that is another gift that we can give them. So we have that. It's called emotional care tags, and just a ton of stuff. So if you go to the resources page, you can see a lot of our downloadable guides that you can get. And we would love for them to subscribe, because many parents use our weekly blog as a little bit of a launching point for conversations with their kids. Now, not every blog might be appropriate for your situation, but many of them are, and they just serve to be, one more little reminder that, hey, talk to your kids about this, help your kids with this. We want to mentor parents so parents can mentor their children.
Thank you. I love that so much. Thank you so much. I love that you're opening up the conversation. I love that, we're becoming more and more educated and aware of all of these aspects of the exploitation of just conversations and addiction. All of those things are all part of this culture that's trying to infiltrate our homes and create noise that is confusing and distracting. But when we get clear on our values, we get clear on what is important, and the media that we want to bring in, allow into our families, then we can get clear on our goals and our, what language we will help us to protect our futures, so that we don't fall into addictive habits and we don't fall into exploitation, but we can learn to avoid those things. Right. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you I'm so glad to be talking with you today.
Thank you, my friends. You made it to the end. You bravely went where few parents are willing to go. Thank you for listening to this episode. It is so important. Please check out the show notes at homeandfamilyculture.com. I linked all of the references that Kristen talked about, even the ones to her website, so that I broke them down so that you don't have to do all the different searches to the different downloads and articles that she referenced. Thank you again so much for listening. Thank you for enduring this controversial topic. Please check out Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. It really is a wonderful resource for parents to give us a safe tool to be able to start this conversation with our kids. And go to the website, protectyoungminds.org, because Kristen does have a lot of amazing resources to help us to keep this conversation going and to become an authority for our kids to look to when they need answers to their questions. They should come to us. We need to set aside our own shame, our own embarrassment, or whatever that is keeping us from having these conversations and talk to our kids. Thank you again for listening. Please share, please like, please rate and comment. Thank you again.